What's going on, guys? Happy Friday the 13th. It's pretty common knowledge at this point in human history that Friday the 13th became a day associated with bad luck when, was it King Henry IV issued an edict for the heads of the Templars. It was Friday the 13th, I think 1307. And his justification for that was that they were blaspheming Christ, and they were worshiping false idols, and they were engaging in homosexual acts and all of this sort of evil stuff. But then one might ask themselves, why would the day that these rat bastards were ordered to be arrested and executed associated with bad luck hundreds of years later? And I think the reality is that the Templars were actually warriors of light. You know, they were originally poor warrior monks that somehow got all of the crowned heads of Europe in debt to them. And this is another angle that makes this really interesting to me, because this book that we're going to be using as a reference, Morals and Dogma by 33rd Degree Freemason Albert Pike, he describes using a charge of some kind to transmute mercury into gold. And it just so happens that was done in a laboratory for the first time in 1933, I think. Lead was actually transmuted into gold in a lab, although it was very small amounts, but it still happened, I think a month ago or something for the first time. But mercury is one proton away from gold. So it is exactly the substance that you would use to transmute the most easily. So that strikes me as evidence that alchemy was real. And I always found the story of the Templars being poor warrior monks that managed to just start a bank and get the crowned heads of Europe in debt to them a little bit fishy, right? I mean, people, literally, if you do research, what you'll see is people, you say, how did they get them all in debt, all these royal families? And they say, well, they started a bank. Okay, cool, go start a bank. I'll wait, first of all. Second of all, this is a bank that dealt exclusively with royals. And that means they had to be able to issue loans that were of the, magnitude that royals would want. This is the kind of money that the royals couldn't come up with themselves. So these alchemists suddenly had enough gold to issue these loans out of nowhere. Just saying, And another aspect that we're going to look at tonight is that officially, like historians and the official position of modern-day Freemasonry, is that they are not connected to the Templars. My suspicion, well before I ever encountered the information in this book here, was that the same mysteries that Pythagoras took initiation in Egypt, that he took to Greece, along with Empedocles, that those Eleusinian mysteries were basically the Templars were initiates of that same Hermetic lineage, and they passed that on to Freemasonry. In this book, Albert Pike says that that's exactly what happened. He also talks in the first chapter about a great revolution prepared for by the ages that has for its aim the amelioration of mankind from servitude and bigotry and superstition and religion and despotism and ignorance and all of these things. And his claim is that this Hermetic knowledge, this transmission, has been persecuted and oppressed. And it's sort of like anything else where, after a certain period, a rose will bloom, that this secrecy and oppression will at some point in human history end, and this revolution will begin to march. And I believe that moment is right now, right? So contrary to what we've all been told by popular culture, the Illuminati was not humanity's enemy. the Templars were not evil weirdos. The Freemasons, although there are bad apples, and due to the necessity of oppression and on the parts of the overlords, and also because there's legitimate power in these things, the Romans, for example, the Egyptians did this as well, infiltrated the mystery schools, stole the secrets, turned them into monotheistic religions, and used them against people. Some of them acquired the knowledge with the sole intent of abusing it, basically. And so I'm not saying that there are no bad apples in any of these groups, but I am saying that that's not what it's about. And yeah, so we're going to get into some of the details of what the Templars actually were doing and why they were doing it. Last time, I think we started with the Knight Kadosh, which is specifically about the Templars. But I remembered that a little bit earlier in the Grand Scottish Knight of St. Andrew, degree 29, there's a little bit of other information. So let me just find my place there. By the way, you guys, do me a favor, hit the like button, share, subscribe, turn on the bell notifications, and select all so you don't miss anything. Consider becoming a patron. By the way, to the patrons also, I apologize earlier. I had a secret stream scheduled. We're going through degree 14 of Freemasonry, and I had some technical difficulties and had to reschedule for Sunday, so I do apologize if that inconvenienced. Demonized, yeah, exactly. Okay, so the Hospitallers and Templars took upon themselves vows of obedience, poverty, and chastity. The lamb, which became the device of the seal of the order of the poor fellow soldiery of the Temple of Solomon, conveyed the same lessons of humility and self-denial as the original device of two knights riding a single horse. The Grand Commander warned every candidate not to be induced to enter the order by a vain hope of enjoying earthly pomp and splendor. He told him that he would have to endure many things sorely against his inclinations, and that he would be compelled to give up his own will and submit entirely to that of his superiors. Sorry, guys, I should have marked all this stuff out. Virtue, truth, and honor are the three most essential qualities of the Knights Templar. Ye shall love God above all things and be steadfast in faith, it was said to the knights in their charge. Ye shall be true unto our sovereign Lord and to your word and promise. Also ye shall sit in no place where that any judgment should be given wrongfully against anybody to your knowledge. The law hath not power to strike the virtuous, nor can fortune subvert the wise. Virtue and wisdom only, perfect and defend man? That doesn't really make sense. Virtue and wisdom only are perfect and defend man. Virtue's garment is a sanctuary so sacred that even princes dare not strike the man that is thus robed. It is the livery of the King of Heaven. It protects us when we are unarmed and is an armor that we cannot lose unless we be false to ourselves. It is the tenure by which we hold of heaven, without which we are but outlaws and cannot claim protection. Nor is there wisdom without virtue, but only a cunning way of procuring our own unfolding. Peace is nigh where wisdom's voice has found a listening heart. Amid the howl of more than winter storms, the halcyon hears the voice of vernal hours, already on the wing. So that is their foundation, right? And this is actually part of the reason why the youth organization of the Freemasons is called the Order of Des Moines, because Jacques de Molay and the rest of the Templars, although they did confess to blasphemy and some of these other things under torture, even while being burned alive and during all that torture, they did not break their vow of silence. They did not give up any of the secrets of alchemy. They did not give up any of the secrets of initiation and the mysteries. And so the point of the Order of Des Moines is to teach kids, young men, that virtue and honor is the most essential, fundamental thing. You know, that's why they still honor him with that name. And by the way, It's worth noting that ever since Pythagoras, we have not one record of anyone breaking their vow above the 32nd degree. And really, no secrets have been leaked of any significance in the entire history of the mysteries. And that is a tremendous thing to consider, you know. Okay, so the Knight Kadosh. We often profit more by our enemies than by our friends. We support ourselves only on that which resists, and owe our success to opposition. There is more profundity in that opening line than, you know, you may have to sit with it for a second, but speaking of not revealing secrets, you can veil the secrets and speak them, and that's what just happened right there. And owe our success to opposition. By the way, this is degree 30. So by the time you encounter this information in Freemasonry, and this book is supposed to be not in the possession of anyone that's not a Freemason, it is, of course, leaked. This book has leaked, but the 33rd degree secret is not printed. There's nothing printed. It just stops at 32 because technically 33 and above is a completely different organization and lineage. The best friends of Masonry in America were the anti-Masons, and at the same time, they were its worst enemies. Men are not the automata of Providence, and it uses the demagogue, the fanatic, and the knave, a common trinity in republics, as its tools and instruments to effect that of which they do not dream, and which they imagine themselves commissioned to prevent. And this is so hugely important right now. The idea that the leaders like Donald Trump, Biden, whoever, you know, Putin, people see what they're doing and they think, what is this atrocity? You know, what is this insanity in the world? But from a higher point of view, reward is commensurate with resistance. Reward is commensurate with resistance. So you could also say without antagonists, there's no story, you know? So these guys are provoking the elevation of humanity with their threats and their resistance, you know? And they have probably no idea that the role that they serve when they think that they're oppressing consciousness, they're oppressing freedom, they're controlling humanity. What they're actually doing is creating the stage, setting the stage for their liberation and their ascension. So that's kind of what he was saying there. The anti-Masons, traitors and perjurers, and some mere political knaves purified Masonry by persecution, and so proved to be its benefactors. For that which is persecuted grows. To them, its present popularity is due the cheapening of its degrees, the invasion of its lodges. They are no longer sanctuaries by the multitude, its pomp and pageantry and overdone display. As 100 years ago, it had become known that the, I can't say that word, were the Templars under a veil, a hidden organization. Sorry, guys, I got to find that tissue because my nose is suddenly running. Oh, here. Okay. Were the Templars under a veil, and therefore the degree was prescribed, and ceasing to be worked, became a mere brief and formal ceremony under another name. Now from the tomb in which, after his murders, he rotted, Clement V howls against the successors of his victims in the allocution of Pio IX against the Freemasons. The ghosts of the dead Templars haunt the Vatican and disturb the slumbers of the paralyzed papacy, which, dreading the dread, shrieks out its excommunications and impotent anathemas against the living. In other words, the Catholic Church is not good. It is a declaration of war and was needed to arouse apathy and inertness to action. An enemy of the Templars shall tell us the secret of this palpable hostility against an order that has existed for centuries in despite of its anathemas and has its sanctuaries and asylate even in Rome. That's the first allusion to the fact that the Templars are actually an extension of an extension of a much older lineage of initiation. Where were we? It will be easy, as we read, to separate the false from the true, the audacious conjectures from the simple facts. A power that ruled without antagonism and without concurrence, and consequently without control, proved fatal to the sacerdotal royalties, while the republics, on the other hand, had perished by the conflict of liberties and franchises, which, in the absence of all duty hierarchically sanctioned and enforced, had soon become mere tyrannies, rivals one of the others. Listen to that. Did you hear that? This is like old history. And he's talking about how these republics, which the United States is, a banana republic, in my opinion. How did he word it? The conflict of liberties and franchises, right? Freedom and corporate control, which in the absence of all duty hierarchically sanctioned and enforced, had soon become mere tyrannies. Does that sound familiar at all, you guys? History repeats like a motherfucker. To find a stable medium between these two abysses, the idea of the Christian hierophants was to create a society devoted to abnegation by solemn vows, protected by severe regulations, which should be recruited by initiation, and which sole depository of the great secrets of initiation should make kings and pontiffs, without exposing it to the corruptions of power. In that was the secret of the kingdom, which without being of this world would govern all its grandeurs. And so he's saying that the original plan, basically, was to use initiation or initiated people, initiates, to staff the leadership of the world, but not for devious purposes, for the exact opposite, because they had seen that this corruption was absolute and that it was present in every nation, and it was destroying freedom and societies entirely, right? And the reality is that if you have a person that is of genuine illumination, they're not going to succumb to that. However, as we will see, the Knights Templar overestimated their own imperviousness to that corruption. Well, thank you, Crypto Mike. Where are we? Yeah, this is good stuff, man. Those of you that just popped on, this is Degree 30 of the Knight Kadosh from a formerly secret book on the degrees of Freemasonry by 33rd degree Albert Pike, published in 1851 or 1871. The idea presided at the foundation of the great religious orders, so often at war with the secular authorities, ecclesiastical or civil. Its realization was also the dream of the dissident sects of Gnostics and the Illuminati. The dream of the Illuminati, you mean the people that they've been telling you are trying to control the world and everything for evil purposes? Yeah, no, that's not what the Illuminati was, not at all. They just don't want you to know that, so they tell you that they're evil so that you don't look and find out that they're doing exactly what I'm trying to do. You know what I mean? Like, read Adam Weisshaupt papers if you don't believe me. They're published online. And you'll see that every single person watching this would vote for Adam Weisshaupt for president if they could. Who pretended to connect their faith with the primitive tradition of Christianity. See? Also, if you read Adam Weishaupt's writings, you'll see him sometimes pretending to be Christian, but it was just a cloak, like he's saying. It at length became a menace for the church and society when a rich and dissolute order, initiated in the mysterious doctrines of the Kabbalah, seemed disposed to turn against legitimate authority and conservative principle of hierarchy and threaten the entire world with an immense revolution. Basically, they wanted to bestow sovereignty upon each and every person and connect them directly to the process of illumination rather than outsourcing it to a church and priests and shaman and all this kind of stuff. And that's what he means about that they were going to try to turn the people against the legitimate authority of the conservative principle of hierarchy, is that, illuminated people are sovereign and they will not take governance, and they do not need governance, and they know it. This is why the mysteries were banned in Egypt and Rome and have been demonized in the United States. The Templars, whose history is so imperfectly known, were those terrible conspirators. In 1118, Knights 9 knights crusaders in the east, among whom were Geoffroy de Saint Omer and Hugh de Payens, consecrated themselves to religion and took an oath between the hands of the Patriarch of Constantinople. A see always secretly or openly hostile to the Roman Church from the time of Photius. The avowed object of the Templars was to protect the Christians who came to visit the holy places. Their secret object was the rebuilding of the Temple of Solomon on the model prophesied by Ezekiel. Now remember that the Temple of Solomon in this context is not, he's not talking about reconstructing an actual building here. This rebuilding, formerly predicted by the Judaizing mystics of the earlier ages, Jewish mystics, I would have to say, had become the secret dream of the patriarchs of the Orient. The Temple of Solomon, rebuilt and consecrated to the Catholic worship, would become in effect the metropolis of the universe. The East would prevail over the West, and the patriarchs of Constantinople would possess themselves of the papal power. The Templars, or poor fellow soldiery of the holy house of the temple, intended to be rebuilt, took as their models in the Bible the warrior masons of Zorobabel, who worked holding the sword in one hand and the trowel in the other. That is basically, your action is guided by intellect. Therefore, it was that the sword and the trowel were the insignia of the Templars, who subsequently, as will be seen, concealed themselves under the name of Brethren Masons. This name, Frères Macons in French, Necon in French, adopted by way of secret reference to the builders of the Second Temple, was corrupted in English into Frère Mason, as Pythagore de Croton was into Peter Gower of Croton in England. Pythagoras became Peter Gower. Who's Peter Gower? Remind me to look that up, somebody. Karum or Karim, a name rendered into Hiram, from an artificer in brass and other metals, became the chief builder of the Knight Kadosh, the holy house of the temple. The words Banai and Banaim yet appear in the Masonic degrees, meaning builder and builders. The trowel of the Templars is quadruple, and the triangular plates of it are arranged in the form of a cross. If you want to understand that better, go to the first, I think it's the first part of the Eliphas Levi book. It definitely says something about the triad and the quaternity. Look that up, and you'll be illuminated on what that's all about. The quadruple and the triangular plates of it are arranged in the form of a cross, making the Kabbalistic pantacle known by the name of the Cross of the East. The Knight of the East and the Knight of the East and West have in their titles secret allusions to the Templars, of whom they were at first the successors. The secret thought of Hugh de Payens in founding his order was not exactly to serve the ambition of the patriarchs of Constantinople. There existed at that period in the East a sect of Johannite Christians who claimed to be the only true initiates into the real mysteries of the religion of the Savior. They pretended to know the real history of Jesus the Anointed, and adopting in part the Jewish traditions and the tales of the Talmud, they held that the facts recounted in the evangels were but allegories. The key of what St. John gives in saying that the world might be filled with the books that would be written upon the words and deeds of Jesus Christ, words which they thought would be only a ridiculous exaggeration if he were not speaking of an allegory and a legend that might be varied and prolonged to infinity. In point of fact, that is true, that a lot of the stories in the Bible are definitely intended to be allegories. They were borrowed from older religions, but specifically the book of Revelation is nothing but Kabbalistic allegory, the whole entire thing, the seven seals, all of that stuff. If you look in my Eliphas Levi streams, you can find clues to decode all of that stuff, or at least where to look to start decoding it. What else was I going to say about that? Oh, yeah, another interesting thing about that, speaking of the succession of myths, or the adaptation, or adopting, whatever, you guys know what I mean. They stole shit from older stories, Babylonian and Syrian. One of the popular conspiracy theory sort of promulgated by the Christian right is that the mysteries of Freemasonry and all of this stuff is actually the ancient Babylonian religion that is evil and false, right? Well, the story of the flood, David and Goliath, I could go on and on and on. their religion is almost completely constructed from the religion they're talking about, which is wild to say, you know, like, oh, we believe in this that is completely that, but you're evil because we think you know what I mean? Like, what? People, come on, pull it together. It's really wild to hear that shit from them and think like your religion is exactly the thing that you're saying, you know, qualifies it as being false and evil then, you know. Sorry, I got lost in my rantings. Okay, the allegory thing, right? The Johannites ascribed to St. John the foundation of their secret church, and the grand pontiffs of the sect assumed the title of Christos anointed or consecrated, and claimed to have succeeded one another from St. John by an uninterrupted succession of pontifical powers. He who, at the period of the foundation of the order of the temple, claimed these imaginary prerogatives was named Theoclit. He knew Hughes de Payan. He initiated him into the mysteries and hopes of his pretended church. He seduced them by the notions of sovereign priesthood and supreme royalty, and finally designated him as his successor. Now, did you notice that? They're talking about how these people claim to be of the direct spiritual lineage of St. Paul, right? Where'd they get that from? You know how I've been telling you guys that the Romans infiltrated the mysteries, stole everything, and then they built religions like Christianity around it? Look at this. There's still just like a shamanic tradition, which is what the mysteries are, because, you know, the kykeon was a psychoactive drink. Masons are still buried with acacia leaves to this day, which contain DMT for that reason, because it was one of the ingredients, I believe. You know what I mean? It's really obvious that it's true, that they did actually steal all this from the mysteries, and they made a hollow sort of theater of it. And they gutted it so that the people wouldn't be empowered by it. And they convinced them to take all the allegorical stories literally, right? Hermes in the Corpus Hermeticum in the 3rd century warned about that. He said, if people start taking these stories as if they were real, we're in big, big, big trouble. You know, like God forbid that to happen, right? So here we are. So he who at the period of the foundation of the order of the temple claimed these imaginary prerogatives was named Theoclit. Oh, we already read that part, sorry. Thus the order of the Knights Templar was at its very origin devoted to the cause of opposition to the crown of Rome and the crowns of kings, and the apostolate of Kabbalistic Gnosticism was vested in its chiefs. So it was saying it's opposed to all rule, all authority. This is the Illuminati we're talking about. They're opposed to all kings. Why do you think you have been told that they are your enemy, right? Opposed to all kings. And what was their aim? What did he call it? The sovereign priesthood and supreme royalty of the gnosis. This is what they were trying to teach all of humanity, that they needed to become sovereign and to have their own direct experience of divinity, or none at all, either initiated or profane. But you do it yourself and you rule yourself. For St. John himself was the father of the Gnostics, and the current translation of his polemic against the heretical of his sect and the pagans who denied Christ was the Word is throughout a misrepresentation or misunderstanding of the whole spirit of the evangel. The tendencies and tenets of the order were enveloped in profound mystery, and its externally professed the most perfect orthodoxy. The chiefs alone knew the aim of the order. The subalterns followed them without distrust. I'll tell you another secret, too. The reason that it has become sort of habitual for initiates of certain orders to speak about Christ as if he was an actual person is to protect themselves from getting executed and ostracized. The reality is, Christ comes from the Greek concept that is called Christos, which is a spiritual fire. And without that spiritual fire, without that connection to this light, this lux eterna, you are lost and you are in hell. Period. End of story. Look at people in our society. Test the oceans for benzodiazepines and rivers for cocaine. You know what I mean? It's the disconnection from that is driving everyone mad and is allowing the overlords to manipulate and control them through fear because they have no sense of purpose. And without that connection to the light, then you are living in hell. So the only possible redemption is through Christos. So we maintain that language because that's the truth, you know, and it's dangerous to speak plainly, or at least it has been. It still is, really. By the way, please hit the like button, share, subscribe, consider becoming a patron. You get access to 6 years of material like this for the $10 tier. You can also sign up for consultations, and we just got our website up, illuminosis.com, so you can go check that out too. We do appreciate support because we're demonetized. There are options to support via Cash App and PayPal in the chats, and cryptocurrency address in every, also in the chat and in every description. Okay, so the tendencies and tenets of the order were enveloped in profound mystery, and it externally professed the most perfect orthodoxy. The chiefs alone knew the aim of the order. The subalternists followed them without distrust. So the subalternists are the lower degrees, and the tendencies and tenets of the order were enveloped in profound mystery, and it externally professed the most perfect orthodoxy. That's what I was just talking about with the whole Christ. Like, we speak about Christ as if it's a person, but it's actually the Christos. And if you understand that and then you think about it, it makes absolute sense, you know. To acquire influence and wealth, then to intrigue and at need to fight, to establish the Johannite or Gnostic and Kabbalistic dogma were the object and means proposed to the initiated brothers. The papacy and the rival monarchies, they said to them, are sold and bought in these days, become corrupt, and tomorrow perhaps will destroy each other. All that will become the heritage of the church. The world will soon come to us for its sovereigns and pontiffs. We shall constitute the equilibrium of the universe and be rulers over the masters of the world. The Templars, like all other secret orders and associations, had two doctrines, one concealed and reserved for the masters, which was Johannism, the other public, which was the Roman Catholic. Thus they deceived the adversaries whom they sought to supplant. Hence, Freemasonry, vulgarly imagined to have begun with the Dionysian architects or the German stoneworkers, adopted St. John the Evangelist as one of its patrons, associating with him in order not to arouse the suspicions of Rome. St. John the Baptist, and thus covertly proclaiming itself the child of the Kabbalah and Essenism together. Okay, a couple of important things there. He just kind of blows right through this, but he says, hence Freemasonry, who the uninitiated imagine to have begun with the Dionysian architects, meaning Greece, or with the German stoneworkers. He's saying, no, it's much older than that. And also the inner and outer order thing, in order to connect that with the Eleusinian mysteries. There in the Eleusinian mysteries, you had the outer order, and then you had the inner order, and the difference was who had drank from the kykeon, which was a psychedelic vision-inducing beverage that I think was made from acacia and rue, as opposed to the common theory that it's ergot brew, because experimenting with ergot would have killed a lot of people before they got it right. And the only evidence anywhere that they used ergot that they cite is in Spain hundreds of years later. It was a guy found in a temple that had ergot sclerotium in his teeth, and that's not a psychedelic dose. That was a ritual, or he unalived himself or something, but that was not for, you know what I mean? And plus Masons to this day still buried with acacia. Why is that? Why did the Egyptians consider it the tree of life if they didn't know that it was psychoactive? And they definitely knew that rue was psychoactive. People say, why is there no record of this? And it's like, well, there's no record of ergot anywhere either. So that's a big contention with me, this whole thing of ergot being the drink in the kykeon. I just don't think it was. Where were we? Okay, for the Johanngism of the Adepts was the Kabbalah of the earlier Gnostics, degenerating afterward into these heretical forms which Gnosticism developed, so that even Mainz had his followers among them. Many adopted his doctrines of the two principles, the recollection of which is perpetuated by the handle of the dagger and the tessellated pavement of the floor of the lodge, stupidly called the indented tessel, and represented by great hanging tassels, when it really means a tesserated floor, from the Latin tessera, of white and black lozenges, with a necessarily duticulated or indented border or edging. And wherever in the higher degrees the two colors black and white are in juxtaposition, the two principles of Zoroaster and Mainz are alluded to. With others, the doctrine became a mystic pantheism descended from that of the Brahmins and even pushed to an idolatry of nature and hatred of every revealed dogma. So what he's getting at there, and the reason this is so important, remember how this opened? He said that we owe everything to our oppressors, that resistance is how we yield all of our reward, right? So the knowledge is that everything in the universe is there due to the law of necessity. The things are the way they are because they have to be, or the universe wouldn't exist. Mm-hmm. And so dark and light, good and evil generate each other as much as they balance each other. It's not just about opposition. You know, the opposites actually create each other. Death creates life, light creates darkness. In fact, darkness creates light. Scientists just proved that you actually can, that a vacuum can create light spontaneously. So darkness even creates its opposite, light. That's been proven like this week or something. So, you know, wisdom and understanding the world and why it is the way it is and how to relate to it and everything is expressed in those black and white, that juxtaposition of tiles. Well, and you know why Athena just pointed or shared that James Anderson's Constitutions of the Freemasons and other Masonic texts claim that Pythagoras was later known in Europe as Peter Goer. That would be because if Pythagoras was the highest level of initiate, and by the way, one of his ideas about how there are, oh my God, I just remembered the term that I came up with this. Basically, okay, so if you guys follow me, you've heard me talk about the whole Calabi-Yau manifold thing and the D-brains and how they're the only way that I thought of that we could like actually confirm that there is a connection between the conceptualization on that level, because my idea was that this represents kind of the conversion layer in the quantum realm that converts the ideal to the actual, basically. And then the Langlands project found that geometry at different scales all the way down to exactly that level a few weeks after a couple months. I guess it was February when I started talking about it. Langland's paper was published a month ago. So I don't know what the time frame was. But anyways, that harmonic or geometric resonance, I guess a pattern, I think they called it a geometric structure that they had mapped through harmonic resonance, that it does in fact exist. Pythagoras described that 2,500 years ago. So if Pythagoras was the highest level of initiate, he would have known the secret of the Philosopher's Stone and would therefore be immortal. So I think that's what they're referencing there. Okay, to all this, the absurd reading of the established church, taking literally the figurative, allegorical, and mythical language of a collection of Oriental books of different ages, directly and inevitably led. He's basically right there saying the Bible is garbage. The same result long after followed the folly of regarding the Hebrew books as if they had been written by the unimaginative, hard, practical intellect of the England of James I and the bigoted stolidity of Scottish Presbyterianism. And you guys understand, like, the reason to take this dude seriously. This is a 33rd degree Freemason that was a commander of the entire southern jurisdiction of the United States. He has access to all kinds of information that historians do not, you know. I mean, this is more reliable than history books. Like, I would bet my balls on that. And it was never supposed to escape the lodge either, by the way. The same result long after followed the folly of regarding the Hebrew books as if they had been written by the unimaginative, hard, practical intellect of the England of James I and the bigoted stolidity of the Scottish Presbyterianism, meaning that even the one that they have is rewritten, when even the old one was just a composite of books from different places and different centuries that were based on older stories from other religions. So it's like a copy of an imitation of a copy of an imitation of a copy of an imitation of a copy of an imitation. The latter to succeed and win partisans, the Templars sympathized with regrets for dethroned creeds and encouraged the hopes of new worships, promising to all liberty of conscience and a new orthodoxy that should be the synthesis of all the persecuted creeds. Did you guys hear that? The Templars were fucking trying to reinstate liberty of conscience and a new orthodoxy that would be the synthesis of all the persecuted creeds. That is exactly what is needed. You know what they were trying to do? They were trying to subvert this whole bullshit period of dark ages that has been modern history. They saw it coming and they were trying to stop it. And you've been convinced that the Illuminati and the Templars were your enemies. It's the complete opposite. The complete opposite. It is absurd to suppose that men of intellect adored a monstrous idol called Baphomet or recognized Muhammad as an inspired prophet. Their symbolism, invented ages before to conceal what it was dangerous to avow to the uninitiated, was of course misunderstood by those who were not adepts because they were never supposed to even hear about it. And to their enemies seemed to be pantheistic. The calf of gold made by Aaron for the Israelites was but one of the oxen under the layer of bronze, and the cherubim of the propitiatory misunderstood. The symbols of the wise have always become the idols of the ignorant multitude. The symbols of the wise have always become the idols of the ignorant multitude. What the chiefs of the order really believed and taught is indicated to the adepts by the hints contained in the higher degrees of Freemasonry and by the symbols which only the adepts understand. The blue degrees are but the outer court or portico of the temple. Part of the symbols are displayed there to the initiate, but he is intentionally misled by false interpretations. It is not intended that he shall understand them, but it is intended that he shall imagine he understands them. Their true explication is reserved for the adepts and the princes of Masonry. The whole body of the royal and sacerdotal art was hidden so carefully centuries since in the high degrees as that it is even yet impossible to solve many of the enigmas which they contain. It is well enough for the mass of those called Masons to imagine that all is contained in the blue degrees, and whoso attempts to undeceive them will labor in vain, and without any true reward violate his obligations as an adept. Masonry is the veritable sphinx, buried to the head in the sands heaped around it by the ages. The seeds of decay were sown in the order of the temple at its origin. Hypocrisy is a mortal disease. It had conceived a great work, which it was incapable of executing, because it knew neither humility nor personal abnegation, because Rome was then invincible, and because the later chiefs of the order did not comprehend its mission. Moreover, the Templars were in general uneducated and capable only of wielding a sword with no qualifications for governing, and it need enchaining that queen of the world called opinion. The doctrines of the chiefs would, if expounded to the masses, have seemed to them the babblings of folly. The symbols of the wise are the idols of the vulgar, or else as meaningless as the hieroglyphics of Egypt to the nomadic Arabs. There must always be a commonplace interpretation for the mass of initiates of the symbols that are eloquent to the adepts. What he said about the queen of the world called opinion, I was talking about this in a stream a couple of days ago, I think, how their opinion is propaganda. Opinion, at least the parameters of what is covered by that word are used as propaganda. Opinion is whether or not you like strawberry cheesecake. Opinion is not which best system is for governance or economics. There's no opinion about that. That's algorithmic. Truth is truth, period, the end. Your spiritual beliefs are not truth. Those are opinion unless they are actually consistent with the truth. You know what I mean? And so that's what he's talking about, that the queen of the world that manipulates the feminine toxicity ruler is opinion. They use that perception and belief to sort of keep people just arguing and fighting with each other and believing that there is no actual truth, when in reality truth is self-substantiating, extremely evident, and it actually takes a lot of effort to keep people from seeing it. Hugh de Payens himself had not the keen and far-sighted intellect, nor that grandeur of purpose which afterward distinguished the military founder of another soldiery that became formidable to kings. The Templars were unintelligent and therefore unsuccessful. Their watchword was to become wealthy in order to buy the world. They became so, and in 1312 they possessed Europe alone more than 9,000 seigneuries. Riches were the shoal on which they were wrecked. They became insolent and unwisely showed their contempt for the religious and social institutions which they aimed to overthrow. They let the cat out of the bag, right? They got cocky, and they started saying shit out loud, like, oh yeah, fucking Catholic Church? Watch, bitch, you know? That wasn't wise. They weren't as powerful as they thought they were. Their ambition was fatal to them. Their projects were divined and prevented. Rome, more intolerant of heresy than of vice and crime, came to fear the order, and fear is always cruel. Hear that? Rome, more intolerant of heresy than of vice and crime, came to fear the order. What does that tell you about empire, right? It has always deemed philosophical truth the most dangerous of heresies. And why is that? Because an illuminated person is a sovereign person that cannot be controlled, and has never been at a loss for a false accusation by means of which to crush free thought. Damn, man. Even back then, he's talking about the Catholic Church, never at a loss for a false accusation by means of which to crush free thought. Pope Clement V and King Phillip le Bel gave the signal to Europe, and the Templars, taken as it were in an immense net, were arrested, disarmed, and cast into prison. Never was a coup d'etat accomplished with a more formidable concert of action. The whole world was struck with stupor, and eagerly waited for the strange revelations of a process that was to echo through so many ages, including our own. It was impossible to unfold to the people the conspiracy of the Templars against the thrones and the tiara of Rome. It was impossible to expose them the doctrines of the chiefs of the order. This would have been to initiate the multitude into the secrets of the masters and to have uplifted the veil of Isis. Recourse was therefore had to the charge of magic, and denouncers and false witnesses were easily found. When the temporal and spiritual tyrannies unite to crush a victim, they never want for serviceable instruments. The Templars were gravely accused of spitting upon Christ and denying God at their receptions of gross obscenities, conversations with female devils, and the worship of a monstrous idol. The end of the drama is well known, and how Jacques de Molay and his fellows perished in the flames. But before his execution, the chief of the doomed order organized and instituted what afterward came to be called the occult, hermetic, or Scottish Masonry. There it is, folks. They say that didn't happen, but according to this third degree and a 30th degree fucking, this is like the handbook of getting through the initiations, right? According to him, that is what happened. Now, you got to wonder, too, and I do know some high-level Masons right now. There's some in our community, and they are not happy with the lodge as of this moment, So take note of that. Because I'm not, like, when I say Freemasonry isn't evil, you guys should, maybe reconsider if you think that. I'm not saying that it hasn't been taken over or subverted or something. I'm saying that the Hermetic knowledge lineage has the most clear and concise gateways into the absolute truth of reality, and it's just, and also demonstrations, so your success is your proof. We don't need faith. We need certainty in our spiritual life, certainty to the extent that it's possible, right? So that's what I mean when I say this, that the way that Albert Pike intended for it to be, and Aristotle and Pythagoras and me, and that's the pure lineage of it. That's the fucking energy that is being transmitted through these initiates. Occult, Hermetic, or Scottish Masonry. In the gloom of his prison, the Grand Master created 4 metropolitan lodges, at Naples for the east, at Edinburgh for the west, at Stockholm for the north, and at Paris for the south. The initials of his name, JBM, found in the same order in the first 3 degrees, are but one of the many internal and cogent proofs that such was the origin of modern Freemasonry. See? Who are these historians and whatnot that are denying it? They have his initials written everywhere. Their youth's order is the De Molay, you know? And again, I've showed you guys how this goes back to the Eleusinian mysteries with the inner and outer order, the same structure for initiates. The acacia leaves, the psychedelic acacia leaves buried with Masons, you know? It all tracks, guys. The legend of Osiris was revived and adopted to symbolize the destruction of the order and the resurrection of Kahrum, slain in the body of the temple of Karum Abai, the master, as the martyr of fidelity to obligation, of truth and conscience, prophesied the restoration to life of the buried association. He's talking about the original Egyptian situation that inspired the Hiram Abiff. If you guys are, I notice there's people piling on, you really probably should watch this from the beginning, because I'm pretty sure it was flaming, lit fire, flames blasting everywhere, burning up the shadows. But yeah, Hiram Abiff was killed, and the reason was, he's a martyr of fidelity to obligation and truth and conscience, right? That's what that whole thing symbolized. And that's what happens usually if you take on that role. He who speaks the truth has few friends and usually ends up getting martyred. So, there's that to consider. The Pope and the King soon after perished in a strange and sudden manner, so they got their revenge. Squin de Florian, the chief denouncer of the order, died assassinated, and breaking the sword of the Templars, they made of it a poniard, and their prescribed trowels thenceforward built only tombs. Nice. The order disappeared at once. Its estates and wealth were confiscated, and it seemed to have ceased to exist. Nevertheless, it lived under other names and governed by unknown chiefs, the secret chiefs, revealing itself only to those who, in passing through a series of degrees, had proven themselves worthy to be entrusted with the dangerous secret. The modern orders that style themselves Templars have assumed a name to which they have not the shadow of a title. Like I said, even while being burned alive, the Templars did not divulge the secrets. They did confess to things that they probably didn't do. They confessed things that would affect them, but they did not divulge any secrets. They maintained that commitment, absolutely. And there is another thing that's worthy of note here. We talk about how the lodges have devolved and things have gotten worse, and it's not what it used to be and all that kind of thing. In the days of the Eleusinian mysteries, before you were allowed to even apply for initiation, you had to basically prospect for 3 years. Now, you can go and just join the Masons. You don't need a relative in the Masons anymore. You don't need to not have a criminal. Like, they've lowered the standards because the recruiting has fallen off. So, you're not going to become a 33. In fact, when I was brought in, the lodge master, we were having lunch, and he was a 33 degree, and I said, are you going to take the 33rd? And he said, that's not in the cards for me. And that was a trip, because it's like, well, how do you know that? Why do you know that? And it may be that he had made a mistake or something, and he just knows that his integrity will not be valued or will not be appraised highly enough for him to make that, But that was his answer. That's not in the cards for me. The successors of the ancient adepts of Rose Croix, the Rosy Cross, Rose Croix, I guess, abandoning by degrees the austere and hierarchical science of their ancestors in initiation, become a mystic sect, united with many of the Templars, the dogmas of the two intermingling, and believed themselves to be the sole depositories of the secrets of the Gospel of St. John, seeing its recitals an allegorical series of rites proper to complete the initiation. The initiates, in fact, thought in the 13th century that their time had arrived, some to found a new hierarchy, others to overturn all authority, and to press down on all the summits of the social order under the level of equality. You hear that? That's exactly the opposite of what all of the conspiracy theorists tell you that we are about. That's not what we're about. We're not trying to control shit. It's the complete opposite, and that's why that narrative has been created. I know I say that a lot, but I'm not going to stop saying it. The mystical meanings of the rose as a symbol are to be looked for in the Kabbalistic commentaries on the Canticles. The rose was, for the initiates, a living and blooming symbol of the revelation of the harmonies of being. It was the emblem of beauty, life, love, and pleasure. Flammel, or the book of the Jew Abraham, made it the hieroglyphical sign of the accomplishment of the great work. Such is the key of the Roman de la Rose. The conquest of the rose was the problem propounded to science by initiation, while religion was laboring to preserve and establish the universal triumph exclusive and definitive of the cross. If you don't know what the symbolism of the cross actually is, start with a cube and then explode it, and think about that first. Go from there. The conquest of the rose was the problem propounded to science by initiation, while religion was laboring to prepare and establish the universal triumph exclusively and definitive of the cross. To reunite the rose and the cross, which, by the way, are a penis and a vagina, the lingam and the yoni, on one level. Also, the rose has 49 petals, which is important. What does 4 and 9 add to? 13. And it's Friday the 13th, right? So, more clues there. Also, 13 is the number of initiation. So, for the Templars to have been arrested on the day of initiation and the year of initiation, with the 49-petaled rose as their, shit's cute, right? That's called synchronicity, by the way. That's macro synchronicity, though. That's like, it's like collective synchronicities for those that really understand that the true scripture is written upon the land for those who have eyes to see it. To unite the rose into the cross was the problem proposed by the high initiation. And in fact, the occult philosophy, being the universal synthesis, ought to explain all the phenomena of being. Religion, considered solely as physiological fact, is the revelation and satisfactory of a necessity of souls. Its existence is a scientific fact. To deny it would be to deny humanity itself. The Rose Croix adepts respected the dominant hierarchical and revealed religion. Consequently, they could no more be the enemies of the papacy than of legitimate monarchy. And if they conspired against the popes and the kings, it was because they considered them personally as apostates from duty and supreme favors of anarchy. And that is why you don't see me really fucking with the Rose Cross tradition, because they are one of the first orders to really just like give up the whole thing of sovereignty and just be like bitches of the elite. They were punks. They were punk bitches. And they just sucked up to the man, So, not a huge fan of the Rose Croix. And they also really pandered to Christianity as well. What, in fact, is a despot, spiritual or temporal, but a crowned anarchist? Holy shit. That's a good one, isn't it? What is a despot, spiritual or temporal, but a crowned anarchist? One of the magnificent pantacles that expresses the esoteric and unutterable part of science is a rose of light, in the center of which a human form extends its arms in the form of a cross. Commentaries and studies have been multiplied upon the Divine Comedy, the work of Dante, and yet no one, as far as we know, has pointed out its especial character. The work of the great Gabellum is a declaration of war against the papacy by bold revelations of the mysteries. The epic of Dante is Johannite and Gnostic, an audacious application, like that of the Apocalypse, of the figures and numbers of the Kabbalah to the Christian dogmas, and a secret negation of everything absolute in these dogmas. His journey through the supernatural worlds is accomplished like the initiation into the mysteries of Eleusis, there we go, and Thebes. He escapes from the gulf of hell over the gate of which the sentence of despair was written. By reversing the positions of his head and feet, that is to say, by accepting the direct opposite of the Catholic dogma, and then he ascends to the light by using the devil himself as a monstrous ladder. Faust ascends to heaven by stepping on the head of the vanquished Mephistopheles. Hell is impassable for those only who know not how to turn back from it. Hell is impassable only for those who do not know how to turn back from it. We free ourselves from its bondage by audacity. We free ourselves from the bondage of hell by audacity. In other words, fear. The only thing in your way is you. His hell is but a negative purgatory. That's also one of the symbols of him being upside down. The hanged man is like a plateau, or like if you're on a journey and it stops for a minute, like a delay, part of the meaning of that card. His hell is but a negative purgatory. His heaven is composed of a series of Kabbalistic circles divided by a cross, like the Pantacle of Ezekiel. In the center of the cross blooms a rose, and we see the symbol of the adepts of the rosy cross for the first time publicly expounded and almost categorically explained. For the first time, because Guillaume de Lori, who died in 1260, 5 years before the birth of Allegory, had not completed his Roman de la Rose, which was continued by Chopanal a half-century afterward, one is astonished to discover that the Roman de la Rose and the Divina Commedia are two opposite forms of one and the same work: initiation into independence of spirit, a satire on all contemporary institutions, and the allegorical formula of the great secrets of the Society of the Rosy Cross. So, you guys know this whole message of my entire channel has basically been like, this stuff has been suppressed, it's been persecuted, because they know that it will be the end of them. It has always been opposed to the tiara and the crown and the papacy. Always. All of the externalized religions, the ones that are visible to the profane, as they call them, they're all bunk versions of this thing that has been demonized. Because it literally, if people have their sovereignty and they're illuminated, they're done. They're fucking done, and they know it. And I think that's about to happen, and they know it, and that's why they're doing everything they're doing right now. Mm-hmm. By the way, you guys, please hit the like button, share, subscribe, consider becoming a patron, visit our website, illuminosis.com, and we have retreat events in July and August, and also in the Sacred Valley and also in the jungle. The Sacred Valley one is almost full, and the jungle is filling up. So if you are interested in that, you should shoot me an email before it is too late, because we have very small groups, because I don't really like any kind of commercialization of all this. But the least I can do is keep the groups to very small, intimate, so that we can we can interact. People don't get lost in the mix, as is the case in a lot of these bigger retreats. I see Cagliostro's name coming up in a minute. The important manifestations of occultism coincide with the period of the fall of the Templars, since Jean de Meung, or Chopanal, contemporary of the old age of Dante, flourished during the best years of his life at the court of Philippe de la Belle. The Roman de la Rose is the epic of old France. It is a profound book, under the form of levity, a revelation as learned as that of Apuleius of the mysteries of occultism. The Rose of Flamel, that of Jean de Meung, and that of Dante grew on the same stem. Swedenborg's system was nothing more than the Kabbalah, minus the principle of the hierarchy. It is the temple without the keystone and the foundation. Cagliostro was an agent of the Templars, and therefore wrote to the Freemasons of London that the time had come to begin the work of rebuilding the Temple of the Eternal. Crowley claimed to be the reincarnation of Cagliostro and Levi. He had introduced into Masonry a new rite called the Egyptian, and endeavored to resuscitate the mysterious worship of Isis. The 3 letters LPD on his seal were the initials of the words Lidio Pedibus Destru, tread underfoot the lilies of France, and a Masonic medal of the 16th or 17th century has upon it a sword cutting off the stalk of a lily and the words Talem dabit ultio messum, such harvest revenge will give. A lodge inaugurated under the auspices of Rousseau, the fanatic of Geneva, became the center of the revolutionary movement in France. The registers of the Order of Templars attest that the regent, the Duke d'Orleans, was Grand Master of the formidable secret society, and that his successors were the Duc de Maine, the Prince of Bourbon-Condé, and the Duc de Cossé-Brissac. The Templars compromitted the king. They saved him from the rage of the people to exasperate that rage and bring on the catastrophe prepared for centuries. It was a scaffold that the vengeance of the Templars demanded. The secret movers of French Revolution had sworn to overturn the throne and the altar upon the tomb of Jacques de Molay. When Louis
the 16th was executed, half the work was done, and thenceforward the army of the temple was to direct all its efforts upon the Pope, against the Pope. Jacques de Molay and his companions were martyrs, but their avengers dishonored their own memory. Royalty was regenerated on the scaffold of Louis XVI. The church triumphed in the captivity of Pius VI, carried a prisoner to Valence, and dying of fatigue and sorrow. But the successors of the ancient knights of the temple perished, overwhelmed in their fatal victory. He doesn't mean that they all perished like out of existence. He means that they did not succeed in their first effort at overturning the papacy and the crowns of Europe. So, you guys, if you have questions or anything you would like me to weigh in on, it's only been an hour. I'm definitely coming down with like a stomach flu or something, so definitely not going to be here for 4 hours tonight. But if anybody has anything they want to throw in the chat, I am down to chat or whatever. But you guys get the point, man. You know, you hear me talking about this stuff all the time if you follow me. And if you don't, you should hit the like button, subscribe, become a patron. Follow me on Substack, too. It's uncensored over there, and I'm starting to get some traction. So I might disappear from YouTube and just move over there because I can speak freely, which is a lot more satisfying, obviously. Where was I? Yeah, you know, I mean, could he have described it any better? You know, the fact that there is this Christ, this Christos, this spiritual fire that without that connection, you know, we are sheep. And with that connection, we are threats to the crown and the papacy. And they fear, he said, free thinking more than crime. That is their fundamental concern and has been since that book was written in 1851. And he's talking about like since ancient Rome, since Egypt, it has been their primary objective to suppress true spiritual connection to the universe and knowledge of self and knowledge in general, you know. And now I think what's happening is they're realizing that they cannot keep the genie in the bottle anymore, you know. There's too many people that have figured it all out. There's too much ascension going on. We're all fundamentally connected. So as long as entanglement is entrainment is a law, you know, if one person raises themselves up, they raise everyone up. How do we have 18 people and only 10 likes? Come on, you guys. Be cool now. So yeah, come on, you guys. Put something in the chat for me to respond to, and I shall. No? Okay. Thank you guys so much. I would say I would hope this is enlightening, but I know it is. So I'm not trying to be cocky, but facts is facts. And you should share this stuff with people. We have average view duration, not even shitting. I'm going to screenshot this right now. Is 11:11, and I swear to God, you guys, it almost always is. I swear, it almost always is. Can I put screenshots in the chat? I don't think I can. Oh, yeah, I can, huh? What was I reading? It is, hold on. Let me grab the book again. Oh, no, I can't upload stuff to a chat, huh? Yeah, they wouldn't allow that, would they? No. Nope. What am I reading? It is, oh, and I didn't tell you guys how I got this book, too. I swear to God, this is a true story, 100%. So this is a first edition copy too. You can see that I didn't exactly treat it like a collector's edition because that's not what it's for. But it was written by Albert Pike, who is a 33rd degree. Let's see. Morals and Dogma of the Accepted Scottish Rite of Freemasonry, prepared for by the Supreme Council of the 33rd degree for the Southern Jurisdiction of the United States and published by its authority. And then it has this stamp there. I don't know if you guys will be able to.
going to read it, but it says, esoteric book for Scottish Rite use only, to be returned upon withdrawal or death of recipient. So when I acquired this book, it was many years ago, and I did not really, I've had a bank account for like 2 weeks in my entire life, so like ordering things online was not possible for me. Still to this day, I think I've only done it like twice or something. So it didn't occur to me to check on Amazon. I don't know if it had leaked enough by then. So I was in the middle of my Chapel Perilous period, the Phoenix process period, and I had figured out that I thought I knew what Freemasonry really was and where it came from and all of these things. And I found out about this book, and I thought, man, I got to get my hands on it, but how am I going to do that? And about 3 or 4 days after I decided that I needed to get my hands on it, I had a dream where it was on the shelf at the used bookstore in Durango, Colorado, which is 15,000 people or something in the entire county at the time. And so I woke my girlfriend up, and I wanted proof that if it was there, that this actually happened. So I told her, we're going to go get Morals and Dogma. And I drove down to the used bookstore and pulled it off the shelf exactly where it was in the dream. This is that copy. And yeah, so that's what we're reading, and that's how I got it. It actually happened to me twice with books like this. The other time, I was getting ready to leave to go to vacation out on the coast of Mendocino. I rented a cabin, and I read a list of suggested reading from Aleister Crowley to his students, and I saw the Kabbalion, and I remembered somebody saying to me, I thought it was my stepfather, but he says he's never heard of it. I called him up and I was like, hey, yeah, I got that book you recommended to me. And he's like, I've never heard of that before. So the Kabbalion it was, and I connected with that memory, and that's what made it stick out. So I out loud said to my girlfriend, I really hope we can find a copy of this Kabbalion. And we go out to Mendocino, and there's this little tiny, Mendocino is a town of 300 people at max, summer high population. And we go upstairs, and there's only like maybe 100 books in the whole place. And she finds this little blue book, and she pulls it out, and it was an 81-year-old mint condition copy of the Kabbalion. 81 years, it looked like it had never been touched. Like, it was insane. It actually made me paranoid for a second. I was like, okay, secret societies follow me around planting shit now. I didn't really think that. But then when we got to the hotel, we ate acid, and right as it started to come on, I was like, what does Lucifer have to do with all this shit? And flipped the book open, because I had become really fascinated with that, and I knew that the official stories were not correct. So I was like, what is the real deal with that? And I flipped it open, and I'm looking right at the word Lucifer. Later I checked, and it's the only time it occurs in the entire book. And it said, Lucifer, as any good occultist knows, and the other fallen angels are, like, in a sense, real. I don't remember the exact wording of it. And I turned the book around and showed her, and it was like so weird, I guess, that in the acid that she ran to the bathroom and threw up. And all night long, we would be having these really deep conversations. Like at one point, we were speaking to each other from the point of view of the masculine and the feminine, like as if we were the generalized thing. I didn't even realize it till afterwards, but I got stuck, and I flipped the book open again, sitting in the hot tub, on this amazing cliff right over the West Coast Ocean. It was incredible. I flipped the book open again, and it's like gender isn't everything, and it starts like continuing where we got stuck, And all night I would do that. I would trip on my words or get stuck, and I would just flip the book open, and it would be like right where it should be in order to facilitate the, lubricating the fucking conversation or whatever. What a long, strange trip it's been. You're telling me, bud. When I was 5 years old, standing in a Catholic church, I saw an expanse of light, and then it went dark and knew in that moment something was not right. Yeah, something's not right with that for sure. It's coca. I'm chewing coca paste. Friday the 13th isn't Norse or something, where Loki was the 13th guest. Well, that's the thing about 13. There's no reason why it's the number of initiation, right? And this is a clue to the whole thing. This is how the universal mind kind of reflects these things, right? It's not like a deliberate communication, I don't think. On some level, maybe. But, you know what I mean? Stuff reflects its essence and its nature throughout time and space.
And so 13 is a number of initiation because there are 12 zodiac signs, and the 13th thing is the sun that illuminates them. You know, the reason 11 is the number of magical expansion is because the sun, we're deeply connected to it, and our sort of like parapsychological capacities of consciousness increase as the solar storms, you know, as the solar cycle goes toward its maximum, they increase. And so that's the number of magical expansion because of that connection with the solar cycles. And so when you're, you know, not unlucky because of Loki or something, that 13 is associated with Loki for a reason, but it's not got anything to do with Friday the 13th. That's definitely just the Templars. And the thing is, the reason it stuck with humanity like that and felt like such bad luck is because on some level we know. When the Templars were arrested and executed with their real mission that they almost succeeded in of overthrowing the oppressors all over the planet, destroying the Catholic Church, you know, and all of the other oppressive religions, they were this close to actually pulling that off. And they actually had a ton of money. You know what I mean? People on some level knew. So when the Templars were stopped, anyone that knew about it on some level was like, oh, fuck, you know? Like in the collective mind, we knew that that was like the worst day in human history, that this attempt at a coup in consciousness, you know, to overthrow the old Aeon early, basically, before World War I, before World War II, before Vietnam, before Auschwitz, before, you know, slavery. Well, modern slavery has been slavery, but you know what I mean? Like, that was the agenda. And on Friday the 13th, that agenda was canceled. And so here we are right now with the same moment and repeating in history, where this time the stakes are much higher, because if we fail, we're done. We're done. You know, we're either gone or we're slaves or both, you know. So, and really, this is the only solution. You cannot, when we watch all the normies sit around and brainstorm, like, okay, communism, socialism, capitalism, ism, schism, ism, schism, ism, schism, ism, schism, not going to do it. Not going to do it. Until you change the consciousness of the people, none of it's going to work. None of it will work. There's nothing you can do along those lines. You cannot just create a system of laws and expect people to just adhere to it. The change has to come from within. Otherwise, it's going to be superficial, and it's just going to foment hypocrisy and contradiction and dissonance and bullshit. You know, it's not going to be effective. The thing is, their criticism is, well, you guys are naive. You know, you're hippies thinking that we can change the consciousness of a planet. No, that's not naive. It's not naive. If it wasn't, they wouldn't be putting trillions of dollars into propaganda all over the world to stop it. It's the natural evolution of humankind. They're denying our sovereign birthright by obstructing that process coming to fruition. Because them some punk-ass bitches type shit. All right, you guys got any more questions or comments to feed me? I feel like I'm kind of lucid right now, so it would be a good time. Yeah, and so what is my grounds for saying that? You guys already know, probably, but entanglement, quantum consciousness, there's evidence for this now. We have evidence for a universal mind in the form of context-aware morphological adaptations. What else? Non-neural intelligence is a thing, you know. People are finding code in the supersymmetry equations in the universe, and they're saying, oh, well, that means there must have been aliens that are... No, stupid. It means there's intelligence inherent in the fucking blueprints under the wiring under the board, you know. That's what that means. That means that something created this, you know. And it doesn't mean that there's a sky god up there. I'm not like an apologist for religion at all. I want to see it all destroyed, because there is a reality. There's only one truth. And in this book that we were reading tonight, in the beginning, he says, man had the truth, but found error, and now is wandering in the darkness of superstition and delusion. You know, And you just, if you guys were watching the stream, you heard why. I almost didn't do this tonight too. I'm glad I did because I'm kind of sick and I was like not sure if I would even be able to sit here without having to like leave. I'm glad I popped on because I feel like that was needed, even just to get stir me up, provoke some inspiration in the old goat. All right, I still see no questions, so I guess I can just continue to talk about this. Should we go over the history of it all real quick? I mean, or what it all means? You know? The idea basically is that the truth is something that resides in everything that we look at. Right? The all is in the all. And through the cultivation of intelligence, knowledge of the natural world, philosophy, mathematics, geometry, but also use of entheogens and rituals. And rituals not in the sense that we're trying to summon demons and stuff necessarily. Ritual can be a powerful tool for organizing the mind and making yourself a hollow tube to bring down fire from heaven, and in order to empower a person to create their microcosm in accordance with their true will without obstructing anyone else, you know? And there's all kinds of things from my story that if you take them at face value, kind of prove it. You know, something just happened the other day that was hard to watch because of how this all turned out. But if you follow me, you may have heard me talk about how I told my mother that in order to prove that consciousness has more of an influence than people generally believe, and this is in like 1999 or something, you know, before it was like a popular idea. And I had never heard Jerry Garcia say this before at that time, and I told her that. And then just 2 days ago, I saw a clip of him in an interview I'd never seen before, and he said, well, basically what happened is I took LSD and I realized that I could like basically imagine things and they would happen. And, you know, I don't know what that means exactly, but it either means that I'm delusional and I've had a really good time anyways, or it says something fundamental about consciousness and our reality. And this is way before all the new agey stuff, you know what I mean? Like that was a real magician, like trying to tell you something. And just in case there's anyone out there who doesn't know this, it actually did almost happen because Phil Lesh asked me for music, the bass player from the Grateful Dead, but I chickened out and didn't bring him anything. And then the next week, my guitar teacher had sent a recording to Bob Weir, and he told me someone important was coming, but he didn't tell me who it was, and I didn't go. So if I had just showed up, this thing I told my mom I was going to prove with consciousness, it did happen. I mean, you know, I didn't show up, but it did happen. And I did play with some of them. Rob Baracco was in the Dead after Jerry. I played with him. And Jay Lane is in Dead and Company now. I played with him. And Donna Jean Godchow was on stage with her for a song. She was actually in the Grateful Dead, an official member at one point. So I did it. I did do it. But I could have done it on the level that I meant when I told my mother that if I had just showed up, you know. So it's real, you know. It's real. Again, though, it's not like the New Age law of attraction coaches try to tell you. So much more goes into it, you know. I had absolute dedication to my instrument and my mission from the time I came out of the womb, and I still kind of managed to fuck it up, you know. So it's not like this message just means that anyone can just manifest whatever level dreams that they want without any effort. That's not at all what I'm trying to communicate here. But what I am saying is that the true expression of human potential has been deliberately suppressed, and we might lose the entire game if we don't realize what's going on. People have to set aside their ego and realize everything they thought they knew was wrong. Your party is not the good party, no matter which side you're on in the United States. They're controlled by the same people, period, end of story. It's been that way ever since. It's never real. All of that outward government and all outward religion is all a tool to control the minds of the masses and nothing more. Stop it. Stop it. If you don't, you're fucking doomed. Seriously. It's that simple. Stop it. don't be a coward, you know, because if you can't let go of believing that you're on the side of the people that are ultimately going to win, you're a fucking coward. You know, we don't need you. We really don't. You are the problem at this point. And I'm no longer have any intention of like mincing words about that. Just snap the fuck out of it, come to grips with reality, and let's fix this, or at least get the fuck out of the way. If you can't lend a hand, get out of the way. You know, this is the Illuminati talking. Fucking illuminate. You know, quit believing shit you read on the internet. You know, quit believing your boomer parents. It's like if a boomer, you know that old thing, like if a tree falls in the forest, does anyone hear it? If a boomer speaks in the forest and no one hears it, is he still wrong? Is he still a narc? Like, and I know it's not all boomers, but the older generations, man, they were fucked up by the overlords severely. The World War II generation came home and they were just so damaged. They raised a nation of narcissists. And those raised a generation of people with antisocial, or is it borderline personality disorder, you know, and so on and so forth. It's time to stop that shit, heal the lineage. The buck stops here. Pass the buck or pass the baton, but you can't pass the police or the Pentagon. Not like we are, not with votes you can't. Not with votes. By the way, I saw that people gave some woman $250,000 for calling a 4-year-old the N-word. So I thought, you know, I'm here like trying to start a revolution. Maybe you guys might consider supporting this channel if you appreciate the message as much as those people that sent that woman $250,000 for calling a little kid a mean word. I just, you know how hard it is sometimes to keep like trying to have faith in humanity when you see shit like that. You know, we need to consolidate our power. We need to pick up the sword, which is knowledge, right? Sword of intellect. That Jacques Desmoulins, you know, think about it. He was burned alive for trying to save our asses. Adam Weishaupt also went to prison, the founder of the Illuminati, trying to illuminate humanity and get rid of these assholes. He's been demonized. So is Jacques Desmoulins. Laughed at, oh, they're magicians, or, you know, stupid, superstitious. No, man. Nope. Wrong again, muggles. Wrong again. Pinche pendejos. Seriously, and I think I went off on a different tangent, but what I was saying earlier is that, you know, entanglement, entrainment, we are magicians, and once you're initiated, once you're in the know, then you have the ability to fight a battle without speaking a word or moving a muscle. You still should, you know. But once you understand the electromagnetic nature of consciousness and the fundamentally connected status of all energy, then you know that the more you lift yourself up, the more, I mean, really, I think if enough people suddenly like elevated themselves like a significant amount, some of the people like Putin and Trump's bosses, they'd suddenly have aneurysms or something. Like, you guys have no idea what we're capable of. And you know why that would happen? Because of the upward trajectory would be so fast and hard with them cycling down there that it would just, the force would just rupture something. You know, not even your fault. It's nature. Don't even have to feel bad about it. Give a demon an aneurysm because you're ascending. It's not on you. In fact, death creates life, right? So there you go. That's why we don't hate these people. We're just sick of them, you know. And they represent an existential threat at this point. So on that note, thank you guys so much for joining me tonight. I hope this is helpful. Please share this shit because I think, you know, to cut it up, repost it, whatever. I know there was, in that last rant, there was some stuff that people need to hear. So appreciate you guys, and I'll see you tomorrow night for some music.